Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Chinese comfort food classics with a shot at one of my absolute favorite noodle dishes from my childhood, which is a rice cake and pork stir fry known as Chao Nian Gao. For those who are unfamiliar, a Chao Nian Gao most prominently features a sliced coin-shaped rice cake known as Nian Gao, which has been stir-fried with strips of pork loin and veggies. Today we're going to be doing ours with some baby bok choy and shiitake mushrooms. Now, as you can see here, this is not Nian Gao. This is actually the Korean equivalent of Nian Gao known as tteok, because I literally went to 5 grocery stores in Chinatown and every store that I went to said that they were sold out of Nian Gao. How does that happen? I don't know. The point being, obviously a rice cake is not a complicated concept, so as you might expect, it occurs throughout many different Asian food cultures, including both Korean and Chinese cuisine, which is really handy if all of the Chinese grocery stores sell out. In addition, we'll be pairing this all with a classic rich sauce combination of dark soy sauce, oyster sauce, and black vinegar to create the thick and deeply umami sauce element that is iconic to this dish. Then finally, we'll also be making use of this absolutely gorgeous piece of pork loin courtesy of Taylor's Sausage in Oakland, paired with a bit of baking soda and food science for the most tender piece of pork that you will ever create. Okay, so let's get into it.
Do you feel the world falling around you?
Okay, so diving right in, as you might expect, we're starting off with the 2 aromatics that appear in pretty much all of our Chinese stir-fries. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger. We'll be blooming these in the wok for their aromatic qualities early on in the stir-fry today. Then diving into our veggies next, this is 8 ounces of baby bok choy, which I'm slicing into quarters, followed by about 6 shiitake mushrooms that I'm rehydrating for 10 minutes, then slicing into strips and reserving that soaking liquid for later on as well. Now, I'll also mention that we're using a fairly classic combination of veggies today, which is how I always remember my dad making this dish, but it is also fairly common to include other leafy greens and fibrous veggies like cabbage, bean sprouts, or God forbid that gross bitter stuff known as gailan. So use your imagination here, and most importantly, use what looks fresh. If you can't find baby bok choy, that's totally okay. Get creative and improvise. Moving on to our rice cakes, this is 1 pound of nian gao, which I'm soaking in boiling water for 5 minutes until tender, giving some frequent agitation to make sure that these things don't stick together. And make no mistake, as with any rice noodle, these things love to stick together. Then once these are tender, what you want to do is strain and set these aside in a bowl of water so that they don't stick back together again. Don't just leave these sitting out like I did, or you'll have to pull them apart again one at a time later on. Next up, moving on to my pork loin, this is 8 ounces of just the most beautiful pork loin that I have ever seen, courtesy of Taylor's Sausage in Oakland. Once again, go find them in Swan Market for anything pork related if you haven't yet. Now, a Chao Nian Gao iconically features thin strips of pork loin, which means that we want to be particular with how we go about slicing up our pork here. This might seem trivial, but I actually think that it's an important element to balancing out the chewy bite of that Nian Gao, and really does matter. So I'm giving some very careful deliberation here before slicing up my pork loin into 1-inch pieces, then slicing those in half before finally slicing these all into thin strips. Then next, I'm borrowing some technique from some of our Angus steak recipes and dissolving half a teaspoon of baking soda and water, then combining with our pork and letting sit for 15 minutes. This is going to disrupt the protein bonds of our meats during the cook and result in a more tender bite, which makes it a very useful tool for chewier cuts of meats. Unactivated baking soda, however, does leave behind a slightly metallic aftertaste, so after 15 minutes, I'm also being careful to drain off this excess baking soda before continuing with my marinade. No one likes baking soda flavored pork, am I right? Diving into my marinade next, we're keeping things fairly simple here because our sauce element is going to be quite rich already. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce to start, followed by half a teaspoon of white pepper and a single tablespoon of hoisin sauce for a bit of sugar to round all of this out. I'm mixing everything to combine here, then setting aside for 30 minutes while we dive into our sauce next. Now, my dad swears that he makes this dish using just a couple tablespoons of dark soy sauce and Shaoxing wine, which I think I disagree with because I think we can round out our sauce with a little bit more brightness and umami here. So for our version, this is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce to start, followed by a single tablespoon each of sesame oil and Shaoxing wine. Then rounding this all out, I'm going with my favorite combination of rich sauce elements that you might recognize from a lot of our other really rich stir fries and braised dishes. This is 2 tablespoons each of dark soy sauce, oyster sauce, and black vinegar. The addition of that oyster sauce here is going to give us some nice earthy umami, and then that black vinegar is going to give us just a touch of brightness to cut through the richness of those other elements really nicely. Finally, I'm mixing this all to combine and we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, I have my wok heating up as hot as possible, then I'm adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and, as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then kicking things off here first, I'm starting off with the sear on our pork, which I'm doing my very best to get as much contact with the wok surface as possible for the best possible crisping that we can manage. I'm searing this for 2.5 minutes before tossing and going for a little bit of wok hake carefully. Whoops. Anyway, we're giving this all a toss and cooking for another 2 minutes until cooked through. Then I'm clearing some space in the wok so that we may add in our garlic and ginger with some solid contact with the wok surface as well. I'm blooming these for 15 seconds until nice and fragrant, then tossing everything to combine as well before we follow up with our baby bok choy, shiitake mushrooms, and nian gao. Once again, remember to keep those rice cakes in water while you work, or else you'll be stuck pulling these apart one at a time like I am right now. This is awful. Anyway, I'm tossing these to combine, then following up with my sauce element, followed by my reserved mushroom water. You remembered to save this, right? Finally, I'm letting this braise for about 5 minutes until a thick and luxurious sauce forms, then tossing this all one more time and we're ready to eat. Okay, so I know that I say this about a lot of our Chinese stir fries, but this might be one of my favorite noodle dishes of all time. There's just something super nostalgic about Chao Nian Gao that reminds me of every single Chinese New Year that I ever spent battling with my cousins for the last bite, which, by the way, is the best bite because it's also the bite that has been soaking in the braising sauce for the longest time. Then our nian gao has a perfectly tender and chewy bite to it thanks to our soak and braise. Our pork is wonderfully tender thanks to that baking soda soak. And finally, our baby bok choy is a nice crunchy contrast and bite to all of this. The only downside to this dish is that nian gao does not reheat very well, so you'll either want to eat all of this in one sitting or keep this at room temperature to eat the following morning. In either case though, do not store this in the refrigerator or else those rice cakes will harden up and turn into stale, inedible rocks, which is terrible. So plan accordingly because nobody likes stale nian gao. Finally, the last thing I'll say is I know last year my dad ran out of dark soy sauce and tried to make this dish using just regular soy sauce, which, Dad, if you're watching, you're wrong. You have to have dark soy sauce. Sorry. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated to classic Chinese comfort food dishes, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Wu Can Cook pop-up is back at Oakland First Friday next month, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice humans, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
And tell me, do you ever feel